Arora, co-founder Evolve, and he will do the honors of introducing the esteemed panelists on the stage. Rohan, please be on the stage and introduce the next session. Can we please have a big round of applause for Rohan? Everybody in the audience, let's give it up for Rohan Arora.
Hi, and thanks for the amazing discussion before this panel. My name is Rohan, and I'm the co-founder of Evolve. We're actually building Evolve as the most inclusive mental health app in the world. Right now, we are focused on the needs of the LGBTQIA community. A lot of people have asked us, why this niche? And there are three broad reasons. The first, this is a deeply personal problem for me as well as for the team. Second, members of the LGBTQI community face 4x the kind of mental health challenges than somebody who's not part of the community because of stigma from the society and what we call as minority stress. And the third reason why we are focusing on this niche is that it's no longer a small niche. Actually, 1 out of 5 Gen Z identify as a part of the LGBTQI community as per Gallup in the US. So when we started building out Evolve, we've created a full stack solution which consists of 3 C's. The first C is actually content, where people can actually go and figure out whatever challenges that they're facing. The second C is actually a community layer. And the third C is people can connect to coaches. As we started building out Evolve, we realized that we were getting a lot of organic traction from geographies like US, Brazil, Philippines, and South Africa. We were first baffled. We were like, how do we solve for user needs across geographies? And at that point of time, what happened with us was we got selected by Meti Startup Hub and Google for the AppScale Academy. And that's when Google helped us figure out how to build, engage, grow, and then monetize for these specific geographies. And cut to now, we're actually about 500,000 users. And we're very proud to say that one of our super users actually showcased us at the White House to actually the vice president. So that is our story from building in India and to the world. And we believe that today's ecosystem in India is at the right intersection of like thriving entrepreneurs, great talent, and actually a great investor community, which might have slowed down for now, but it's only going to be a J curve from here. With that, let me introduce Mr. Shiva Shanker, who's the director of Ankur Capital, and he's going to take it forward from here and introduce the whole panel.
Thanks, Rohan. So, hi everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce the rest of my panelists. Just going to call them all one by one. Agam Khare is the founder of Absolute Foods. Agam, if you can just join us on stage. I'm just going to, since we have a time crunch, I'm going to run through these and I will just make some opening remarks before I actually call on each of them to introduce themselves and also start giving their thoughts on the topic at hand. So Agam Khare, we have Manish Gupta, the partner at IndusLaw. Thank you, Manish, for joining. Sangeeta Bavi is the executive director, digital natives at Microsoft. And we have Manish Sharma, the CEO at Lambda Test. So thank you, everyone. I'm Shiva, the director at Ankur Capital. And the topic we have at hand is going to be building in India for the world. And this is an area that we've seen evolve really over the last several years. So as we're going through this, I just thought I'd open up with some comments and thoughts that will help frame how we're actually setting up the overall panel. So the Indian startup community has now actually moved and transitioned from built in India to be a service-oriented landscape to actually being a productized thought process. And we've seen this happen broadly into 3 general themes. We've seen this happen from software solutions that get built out in India that are set up from the very core to be actually best-in-class software solutions on a global stage. And that's where we've had Manish from Lambda Test have extensive experience actually building this at Lambda and also in his prior experience. we've had the consumer sets of Indian consumers and Indian consumer brands rapidly scale up. We've had Aman from Boat Labs join us. We've had several edtech and other fintech products actually scale up globally over the last several years as well. And I'm going to pick on Sangeeta's brain and what she's actually learned from how the consumer sides have actually reoriented and what there are some lessons for Indian startups as they're looking to go through this. And finally, a third area, which is actually early in its evolution, that we have two experts on, both Agam and Manish will be able to talk through on, is on building the next-gen IP or science-based innovations actually coming through from India. So this is an area that, just taking one example that we've seen from our own portfolio, the combination of tailwinds we have in India, right from the availability of talent, which traditionally in the software ecosystem and the tech ecosystem has been seen as software engineering, but the depth of talent we have for a number of other roles based on the higher education system we have in place. The fact that we are a market which is supportive of actually having a number of other contours and business models being tested out, be it our geographic diversity, our population depth, it allows you to actually have a number of these factors built out. And then finally, just the rapid testing you can enable in a cost-effective manner. These tailwinds have allowed, from our own side, a portfolio company of ours, which is called String Bio, which coincidentally, who's in our panel in another room right now, so I will give you guys some of the key highlights from there, has allowed an alternate protein startup built in India for around a $3 million capital raise to compete globally for a best-in-class solution, not as a more cost-effective solution, but a best-in-class solution that is built for developing market realities to actually be able to compete with another peer in their market that has raised over $200 million and just be seen as the right solution for several markets that they're actually catering to. So with these being three areas that we've actually had the evolution of the Indian brands, I'm going to now just join the rest of my panelists and actually start taking some of the questions to give you guys a bit more color on each of these topics. So I'm just going to start off, Manish from Lambda, just to, since I have two Manishes on the panel, just to get your thoughts on how you see the evolution and specifically the build out now of best-in-class products from India to the world. How have you seen that evolve over the time you've been working in the ecosystem, and what do you think have been the key enablers there?
Thanks, Shiva. Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to be here. I think the question that you asked also points out how old I am. I was thinking about it when I was talking to Shiva. I did my first startup for a software product company in the last century. So those of you out there last century, you can imagine how old I am. I think back then, there were specifically three problems that we dealt with. And I like to call it 3Ds. The first one was discovery. We have a software product, but how do we get customers to discover us? We had to go out, pitch in front of customers, and get an opportunity. The second problem we used to face back then was distribution. Right? Yes, I've got a software, but I need to still go and deploy it onto a server. And the third problem was also delivery. Right? We always needed to have somebody travel to the US, travel to Malaysia, travel to UK to do implementations. I think a lot has happened since then due to technological advancement. But I think what has really set India apart has been the ecosystem. Because if you see, there is a very healthy ecosystem of not just developers. Developers are there, but you have all of these large GSIs which are solving problems in every tech, in every industry, for every type of customer in the world. That is leading people in India to understand what kind of problems to solve. So that's one. Second is we also have large captive centers in India which are truly doing innovation as well. So that's another level of learning that is happening for developers in India. And third is the vibrant ecosystem of startups that we have here. They're also solving problems at scale. So when we think about, from a developer tools perspective, 15 years back when a lot of these other large startups were starting, let's say Flipkart and Hotstar and many others, the developers working there started solving problems really at scale. How do I solve, let's say, a video streaming at 1 million users per second? So those kind of ecosystem developments have really charged up building true world-class software from India and then leveraging the scale that SaaS and cloud already provides. So I think it's a great time to be building products from India for the world.
Great, thanks Manish. Sangeeta, just to pick on one of the thoughts that Manish flagged, that there are this infrastructure, there's been this change from the developer ecosystem, but as you see it from the consumer side, What do you see as the challenges that consumer startups have faced as they're thinking about the different types of consumer sets that they're facing in international markets? And just to also tie that with the fact that when we've looked at the domestic market, there's the fragmentation of tier one Bharat audiences. Are there some lessons for Indian startups to take as they're thinking about looking at other markets and expanding globally?
Sure. Thanks, Shiva. So let me look at, if you look at all the B2C startups that we have, right? What is the one common thematic? We are a populous country, and all the solutions that these B2C startups are trying to solve is a problem of fixing fragmentation and information asymmetry through technology. That's essentially, if I broadly have to look at whether it is a cab ride-hailing service, or whether it is a B2B marketplace or some aggregator marketplace that we are creating. Now, the advantage that we have sitting here in India is one of the most populous country. We have tech talent. We are a booming startup ecosystem. Just replicating this in other markets similar to India. APAC, less complex, but very, very similar. That's why you see some of the models with some of the B2C unicorns who've gone and experimented in those markets. So that's sort of one thing that you have that luxury of piloting, scaling in India and taking it to other markets. The other aspects or other challenges which potentially some of these folks come across is every government, every country is moving towards a data residency focus, right? In terms of data should not leave my country. So when you are thinking of creating a solution, building it on a cloud platform, are you thinking of all of these aspects when you're moving to other geographies? Very important. And then the third aspect of also, of course, is about security. I'm talking more from a technology perspective. The third aspect also is about security, because you're sitting on tons and tons of data related to your to consumer stuff. That's the third thing that broadly I think everybody needs to think of as from a B2C perspective as they are going global and international.
Absolutely. Great to hear that, Sangeeta. So Agam, I'm going to pick on you from a slightly different theme. I think what Sangeeta and Manish have flagged off right now is more from a software lens as companies are innovating there. What you guys are doing at Absolute is a much more fundamental science, much more deep science, intellectual property thought process on what are the global evolution of markets. So it would just be good to hear how you are thinking about why it made sense to build these types of solutions that you guys are looking at from India.
So if you look at the history of India, I mean, for 1700 years, we were the foremost country in the world. I mean, the richest civilization in the world. And then we lost out in 200 years. So we thought, how do you bring India back to that spot? And so when we reviewed the history of India, we said, for almost a very large period of time, we built technologies and sciences that were way ahead in time than anybody else. And when we looked at our scientific rigor, I mean, the demography of the country naturally is a problem solver. And so we said, okay, you have the demography, you have the costs of solving things very low, so your opportunity cost is very low. If you can build really great technologies which really transform the world from here, then you're going to go succeed in the world. Because the cost at which you'll have to build those technologies need to first win in this market. And if you can win in this market with a very diversified geography, sort of demography, then you're going to be successful in the other geographies. And so India became the playground of testing and for R&D, for sort of piloting. And then, as Sangeeta said, from then, I mean, once you're successful, then you take it to similar markets, then diversified markets. And so our point of view became very clear that this was the time. And back in the time when we were starting around 2015, I mean, the time was even more ripe. And I think now there's no better time to build it than it's been in the last 8 or 10 years. And I see that the next 5 or 10 years are going to be even better. And so we felt that maybe building great IPs, and we've always also felt as a company that technology is an enabler, but science is the real disruptor. So if you can go down and do that real disruption in science, change some fundamental things, then a lot can really change. So if you look back again at how the world has evolved, I mean, the first time the world really changed forever was when 3 or 4 scientists, I mean, Newton came in, and then you had the Industrial Revolution, and then you had Faraday come in, and then you had electricity, and today you can't imagine the world without electricity. And then you had Schrodinger and Heisenberg come in, and they gave you uncertainty principle, and suddenly you had, today you can do video calls, and we can do these sessions, and it lands right in the spot where it needs to land. And the world got changed forever, because the laws of physics always existed, but they decoded them. So the first wave was about the physics. The second wave happened because of chemistry. The third wave we feel is going to be driven by biology. And the greatest of the enterprises will be built who ride these waves. And so therefore, biology was a natural choice for us.
And just want to pick on that, one of those thoughts from there, Agam. This is for you and Manish, as you both flagged that saying there's fundamental aspects that seem like they're well suited to build in India. We have some advantages in how the ecosystem is coming together, the network of the competitiveness that we have had historically. But as you guys now look at the fact that this is a fairly dynamic global economy that we are building for, how do both of you just think about it, again, from different lenses of saying, this is how we assess competitiveness and how we make sure what we're building is competitive, not just against solutions that exist today, but solutions that are coming through in really the global ecosystem?
So our approach has been very simple. I mean, I tell my team the first question you need to answer is who you are up against. And when you really dig into that, I mean, the world is our home. We were just born in India. So you have to literally take the world as home and take every single company, every single technology that's out there as a parallel or as a competitor which can possibly come across and possibly challenge you. And so just knowing that who you're up against, what is the world really onto today, gives you a lot of comfort around what is that you can really build and how can you really disrupt, maybe not just today, but the next 5 years, what people are going to think. Now, business is more like sports. So you've got to be ahead of everybody else and what your competitors or others can think. So if you just play it like sports, it becomes much more easier. So for us, it's just been like that. I think that the other two questions are very generic, which are the question 2 and 3rd to be answered is what game do you play? And that, I think, as founders of the company, you need to be very, very clear about what is the game that you're going to play. And third is, how are you going to win that game? So what disruption can you really create against the people who are already there? So if you have those 3 basic questions answered, and you really have that sportsmanship in you, you're going to win in the long run.
I'll just pick up from what Agam said. So this is an F1 sport. You have to be driving at super, super fast speed. You know, that small rear view mirror, keep looking at somebody who's right on your tail. Right? So you'll always have somebody trying to out-innovate you. We look at the world as flat. Right? It's not as if, we're building for the US, we're building for the UK, or we're building for Middle East. We're building for the world. So it's a very flat thought process, but you always have to innovate. And I think once you start working with customer, you solve one problem, they throw more problems at you, you innovate on that and keep iterating. And there is always, another startup that is waiting to take you on.
If I can just build on both these points, right? In Microsoft, I run startups business. So we have a vantage point of looking at what kind of innovations, IPs are coming. And if you look at a few years back, it was a lot of, disrupting categories or doing a plus to something that already exists. But look at now with everything that we are doing in SaaS and consumer internet, as well as our India digital stack. We are exporting UPI to the rest of the world. So it's truly thinking product innovation, building from India, for India, and then taking it to the rest of the world. It's no longer about replicating models from the West and making it work for India. It's starting to happen in that startup space.
I completely agree with you, Sangeeta. I think we've gone from the evolution of these models being what worked there, what can we copy over as a model to try to Indianize it slightly, to fundamental rethought of how models can set up. Absolute being one example, Here or AI. Just very fundamental thought process of what is the right solution for here. I'd say even a lot of the SME models we've seen like Khatabook, et cetera, build out saying what is an Indian value prop and a problem that we can actually solve for. They can scale to other developing markets as well and have a lot of implications there and build out from that lens. Manish, just want to go to you and just looking from a commercial and legal lens. So as you are looking at a global outreach for the Indian startup ecosystem, what are the key factors that you feel are enabling factors for growth right now, and what can still come through on that lens to continue to allow to support Indian founders in this regard?
So we have been interacting with a lot of founders. I'm a lawyer who works in this startup ecosystem for I've been working here for last 12 to 13 years. My experience suggests that now in the last 3 to 4 years, the change which we have seen is the biggest change is the change in the mindset and the change in the approach of the founders. They are very clear in the beginning itself whether they want to go global, whether they don't want to go global, remain local, at what point of time, which jurisdictions. So they are very clear in their head in terms of what they really want to do. And I think that is the biggest mindset change, which we have observed. And from a founder perspective, as somebody who is even wanting to go global, I think there are like 4 different aspects which they're really looking at. First is like development of their idea. The second is protection of their idea. The third is implementation, testing, making the business. And the fourth is expansion, where they really go global and try to expand their business. If you look at each of these 4 aspects, I think India provides a very, very fantastic opportunity, because obviously the huge market and the diverse market, you can really test your idea, you can improve on your idea, you can customize basis the consumer experiences, because India gives you that diverse market, different languages, different taste. Government support has been fantastic. At least the approach has been really superb. I don't want to bore the audience with the specific things which the government and the entire ecosystem is doing here, but to say a few things, like when a founder is really starting, what he needs is the protection of his idea. He needs that he can develop, he should not spend too much money. If he wants money, he should be able to raise money. The government should support, there should not be red tape. All the approval should come together in an easy way. And if you want to really go global, then what are the key enablers? Like, from a legal perspective, are you really allowed to go abroad? And I think one important aspect I want to touch is the protection of the idea. That I can share from my legal experience, from what we have seen in the last 5 to 6 years, that IP protection, now Indian courts, Indian legislators, they understand. Earlier it was just for there, but now the Indian courts understand the kind of flexibility, the kind of speed they provide in resolving and protecting the IPs is really commendable.
And that's a good thought, actually, Manish. And this is an open question to the full panel. But as you guys now look at building hardware, software solutions from India, deep IP-based solutions from India, there's also the lens of saying, if you're building for a global market, should IP only be registered here? Should we be thinking about other regions? As you guys are looking at the thought process of saying, what is the right way to set up a thought process that enables the business to scale long term? Are there some things that founders need to be cognizant of saying, if you're building from India as an Indian entity, that will affect the way you're looking at these IP solutions scaling? Agam, I'm sure this is something you have toyed with as well. Just
Yeah, so I think what you need to answer is, where is your market, key market today? Where is your key market going to be in future? And if you're clear about those markets, then you need to protect your IP today in those markets, because tomorrow you may not have the chance. And so when you start thinking of a very IP-driven business, the key to sort of protect that IP starts today when you're starting to build it. And so, for instance, for us, I mean, we go across taking patents all across. I mean, not just India, but US, Israel, UK, Europe. We will go across and take patents all across these countries. While it may not be meaningful to invest that money today, but there is no chance you may have tomorrow. So it's very important that you protect it today.
I think there are different modes, as I would put it. IP is one big mode. I think the second mode is also execution, right? How quickly are you, when you build something, take it to market and acquire customers so that you are known more out there in the market, which leads to a brand as well. So a combination of these 3 things are really what would differentiate you. It goes back to that previous question of yours that, how do you take care of competition? This is one way, right? You keep building more IP and you keep out executing everybody else so that, it takes time for somebody else to catch up to you. It's like, I've built a faster car, but it's lighter and it's got, that nitro button, which will just thrust me forward and leave everybody behind.
Maybe I'll just build on this. One is, while IP itself is not enough to build your moats, right? While you have your tech moats, how do you basically also make sure that you are identifying, ultimately when you have to scale, especially if you're a B2B business, if you have to scale internationally, do you have the right kind of business partnerships? Not just Microsoft, I'm sure a lot of enterprises also are working, there's no other option but to work with startups and help them take to market. So have you identified the right business partner and the right channel partner to scale your business. That I think is very, very crucial for B2B SaaS folks, especially the ones who are selling to enterprises. The second is also product partnerships. It's no longer about just finding the right channel partner, but if you are working with, if you are selling to enterprise or mid-market, there are a bunch of already incumbent folks like Microsoft who have the entire technology fabric built into an enterprise. So you as a SaaS company, do you have synergies with what is already available and trying to figure a product partnership there? You know, these are some of the things that you should as a founder start looking at. If you want to enter a particular market, how do I do that on the backbone of partnership?
Absolutely, agreed on that. And just to build on, sorry, Manish, just going to quickly build on that. I think it's B2B and also B2C of saying, as you're thinking about these new regions, what are the ways you actually start to unlock that? Maybe not the same distribution strategy that was applied for home country going through.
Yeah, if I can also just add, I think it's the evolution of the ecosystem as well. If you look 15, 20 years back, you might not have found talent, you know, product marketing, sales, you know, a lot of different roles who have expertise in working in global markets for, you know, a software product company from India. But now that we've got a very vibrant ecosystem, there are lots of SaaS companies selling all over the world. There are product managers who've been building a lot of things. You know, Manish talked about IP and protection from a law perspective. There are finance heads and finance operators who have, you know, understood global markets, how to, you know, invest in different markets, open companies overseas. That has also evolved very nicely now. So when you're looking for talent, you know, let's say I want to expand into Japan, set up an entity, you'll find somebody in India who's done that before and can accelerate that for you.
I think one interesting idea is, which I think Sangeeta also touched upon earlier, was that when we are talking about Indian startups going global, they are not only going global just for the market outreach. They are going global to dip into the tech talent available, which is unfortunately not there in India. So that is also one important aspect when we think about global, because now Indian startups are not just doing something which is like replicating an idea which has been successful in the Western world, and you are just replicating that idea in the Indian context. Maybe successful, may not be. But now we are really thinking very innovative. We are really going global, working on themes which can really work global, even if it is purely local, purely Indian. But even if they are, even then they are looking at the global markets for the tech talent. I think there are many examples like that. For example, there is a company like ShareChat, completely Indian focused, but they are going to US, going to China, going to UK, just for the tech talent, because that kind of artificial intelligence and other tech capabilities which are required, unfortunately, are not that much in India.
No, absolutely, I think.
And just one point that I missed, right? See, what typically happens is the core of a startup is you know, the purpose. Why has this startup, you know, why have the founders created this? As the startup grows, are you retaining that culture? It becomes very, very important. And, you know, I'm very proud in Microsoft. While the Wall Street talks about everything that Microsoft has done, we've actually undergone a cultural transformation in the last 7-8 years throughout the company. And is your startup, as you're scaling, are you maintaining that culture and driving that cultural transformation? That becomes very important.
No, absolutely. I think you guys have raised a bunch of good points in this last part as well. It's just saying there is probably in pockets still areas that the talent may not be quite as deep, but there are productized versions, just building on what Manish has said, solutions that are actually building out and saying expert has actually been able to solve this, so you don't have to build everything absolutely from scratch anymore. And being able to leverage that network as it continues to deepen in India will be an advantage that Indian startups can continue to leverage on both the deep science and the software side as we're going forward. So I know we only have a couple of minutes left for the panel since we were running a little bit late earlier in the day as well. So just want to check if there were questions from the audience that we can actually take. Hopefully we have time for a couple of questions. Okay, so I don't see any hands up, so I'm just going to build on one more aspect. Sorry, there's a hand up over there. Can someone just pass a mic? I thought I saw someone coming there. Sorry. Just...
Thank you. Hi, my name is Bharat. My question is, what if at launch you feel that your product is more suitable to a market outside of India to begin with? What are your what's your suggestion on proceeding with the acquisition strategy for that?
No, sure. So I think one thing, if your product is something which is completely outside India, I think you need to first of all sit down and decide which jurisdiction you really want to be in. What is the relation with India? For example, if you want to do the tech development in India, but your market is outside India somewhere, let's say US for that matter, then you have to first decide where you need to really incorporate the business entity from which you will carry on the business. That is really important. You have two options. You incorporate the company in India and create a subsidiary outside India in the relevant market, or vice versa, where there you create the main company in the offshore jurisdiction and keep an Indian subsidiary where you will have the back-end support and the tax support. That is something which is really important for you to decide upfront, especially because there have been some changes in law under ODI regulations. So that really demands that you decide these kind of things upfront.
I would, if I can just add on top of it, I would like to challenge your question itself, because unless you made something like, let's say, a GDPR solution which is only applicable to the Europe market, I don't think there's anything that, from a tech perspective, you will make which is not applicable to any company in India. And I'll tell you why. One is, you have 3 different segments of customers. One are the enterprises in India itself, like all the banks, manufacturing. You can go and target them from a solution perspective. The second is the startup ecosystem itself, right? The third, all of the customers who you would target overseas are in India as well. So think about the 1,600 to 2,000 GICs which are in India. So if you want to target a healthcare in the US, they would have their tech innovation center in India. If it's a robotics or manufacturing company, they will also have a center in India. So if you've made something, if you want to target overseas, you can start off by actually going to one of these customer segments in India, try out what is working, and then follow through on what Manish said in establishing something overseas. And then you always have, if it's SaaS, you always have online. You don't even have to establish your operations. A lot of SaaS companies in India don't have any operations overseas. They're selling from here itself. That's the beauty of SaaS.
Bhargav, just come partner with Microsoft. We'll help you.
So Manish was also coming from the context of Lambda test, which is actually global organization building from here. And I echo the framing that he had. There's a lot, especially if you're looking at the GTM, that you can actually test out from a domestic sense as well. See if you can actually get the customer segment to fit. And then, as you're thinking about scaling and replicating, completely agree with what Manish from IndusLaw had said as well. You need to think about what that means. But at least for your first few customers on the software side, maybe you can actually be able to build that out and test out those relationships domestically as well. Okay, so I see a big time's up screen looking right at me. So unfortunately, we won't have time for more questions. Thank you all for the time. I really appreciate the co-panelists we've had here. And I'm going to pass the mic to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rohan, and all our panelists. Thank you so much.